Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 25 of Ionan's Edge. In this bonus episode, I'll be reviewing the Arion Ti, and I'll compare it to its sibling, the Arion White Mountain Knives variant. So let's jump in on this knife. The basic specs on this knife. This knife uses a spear point, just like its other variant. This one, though, uses S35 VN blade steel. It still has a high flat grind, 3.5 inches of usable blade length, 4.6 inch scales, tip to tail length of 8.25, just like its sibling. This knife did weigh in on my digital scale at 4.5 ounces. If you happen to miss my earlier video review of this knife, you'll know that this weighed in at 4 ounces. So the Ti variant is a 1/2 ounce heavier than the micarta version. So let's talk about what I like. Straight off, this is a sexy, beautiful knife. It really is a good looking piece. This thing has this beautiful bead blasted blade, and it's done in a really, really fine bead blast. So it feels silky smooth, but unlike its sibling, which gets fingerprints and smudges all over this satin finished blade, this thing here looks perfect. This knife has been used a good bit. You cannot tell that this knife has cut and sliced quite a bit. There are no marks on this. It just is a great finish, and I think it looks really solid. I wish they had done this knife in this finish. Plus, I think this goes perfectly with this two-tone titanium. So you've got the standard nude or raw titanium on this side, and then you've got your light blue finished titanium on this side. And you can see here in the picture all this beautiful milling that they did on both sides of the knife that gives it just the perfect amount of texturing without being too aggressive or too fine. It just has a really, really super nice feel to it. Comes with a Ti pocket clip, awesome. So again, the overall look and fit and finish of the knife is amazing. So a couple of other things. The S35 VN steel is a nice upgrade. It still has the original factory edge on it. This knife, by the way, I want to give a big shout out to Gonzo Reviews. He was nice enough to send me this knife to do a head-to-head comparison against my own version here, and let me have this for a little while for testing. I didn't do any heavy-duty work with it, but I did do a little bit of cutting and slicing just to see how sharp the knife was and how it held up to some basic tasks. No issues whatsoever. The blade is still just as sharp as when I got it, and slices and dices through paper and other stuff really easy. So this is a great blade steel for this knife. And then the titanium, like I said, is finished really well. The knife has about the same thickness as the micarta one. The blade stock is the same, and the handle thickness is the same. So you're pretty much, size-wise, you're looking at the same specifications on the knife. The other thing, too, is that this knife, being on bearings and having a good fit and finish, I can't flick knives, but when it does open, it's got a really satisfying snap to it. It really snaps open and gives you a really satisfying sound. So again, all really positive things there for sure. Balance point on the knife. The knife's pretty well balanced. It's about 0.8 of an inch behind the pivot point, so it's right in here. That's a little further back than I typically like it, but the knife doesn't feel unbalanced at all in your hand. It has the same good ergos that its sibling has. And in fact, I might say one thing is that this low profile pocket clip in Ti, you don't even realize the clip is there when you're holding it in your hand. I mean, it's so out of the way in comparison to the metal clip that you can see sits up quite a good bit higher. But again, neither one of these knives is uncomfortable to hold. It's just this one is definitely the more comfortable of the two in terms of the overall feel. Now, it doesn't have that soft linen micarta, feel like this knife has, but it has a really positive feel with the beautiful texturing they put on both sides of the titanium, the jimping, and then the lower profile pocket clip. The knife really, really, really feels great. It's a great looking knife. Like I said, excellent fit and finish. I'm very impressed with the overall build quality of the knife. So let's talk about things I don't like and issues. So there really aren't any true faults with this knife. This version of the Arion, like I just said, fit and finish, build quality, and materials are all great. Overall, it's an upgraded version of its sibling, and obviously you would expect at a higher price point and with these materials that it would be a little bit more quality knife overall. With that said, I do have some personal issues with the knife, and here's what they are. The first one is the same issue that I have with my version of the knife, which is that it only deploys one way. It has a coin slot blade cut out, and it only deploys manually by use of flicking your thumb, and I just cannot get the knife consistently to open, just like with this one. It's a frustrating thing for me, honestly. So, like I said in my review of this knife, I wish they had put a small flipper tab up here that just stuck up a little tiny bit on the back of the blade. It would have really changed the way this knife works for me. I just have a hard time getting this knife to open there. That's 2 in a row, but it's just not something I can do consistently. And part of that, for full disclosure, is that I do have arthritis in a lot of my joints, especially some of my fingers. So I don't have a ton of dexterity there when it comes to spider flicking, reverse flicking, or thin thumb holes, coin slot thumb holes like this knife has. Again, that's a personal issue for me. Maybe you have trouble opening knives in that same way, and that's why I'm mentioning it and bringing it up. And then there is one other issue. There's one area that I prefer this knife to this knife, and that's the fact that this is a liner lock over a frame lock. And again, it gets back to a personal preference. What I find with this knife a lot of times is that if I don't place my forward fingers in the right spots, I can't flick the knife open because I'm pressing on the detent with my hand. And if I'm pressing on the detent right there with this finger or with this finger and I don't have my hands placed in the right spot, what ends up happening is the knife won't deploy at all because I'm putting more pressure on the detent ball and the knife doesn't want to release. As soon as I take my hands off of it, it pops out there. So for me, that's kind of the downside to the frame lock, is that, I have to really be careful where I put my fingers. Otherwise, I'm just pressing in here and I'm just making it even harder for this knife to open. Like right now when I'm pressing just very lightly, I can't get this to release. It doesn't have an exceptionally hard detent, but it is pretty stiff, and that's something that I've noticed on this particular knife, that my fingers just naturally seem to rest in this area, and I can't get the knife to deploy consistently for me. Again, that's more of a personal issue than it is a design flaw in the knife. I don't think that that's a design flaw myself. I just think that it just doesn't marry up for me. I can more consistently get this version of the knife to open because I'm not pressing or putting any pressure on the actual liner lock and the detent. So there you go. Those things are not, again, they're not necessarily design flaws. They're just things that I have issue with. So here are the two knives next to each other. Obviously, you know that they're the same knife in two different materials. So they have the exact same configurations. Here they are being compared to a full-size Benchmade Griptilian, just like I showed in the last review video, just to give you an idea of the size of the knives. And the other thing that I found on both of these knives is that they both carry long in your pocket. They have really long handles / scales and a big thick blade. So even though they're not wide in the width sense, they do go down pretty deep into your pocket, and you will probably notice them when you sit down, move, get up, things like that, despite the fact that they're pretty thin. So there you have it, folks. We have the head-to-head meeting between the basic Arion in AR RPM 9 and the top-of-the-line version in S35VN with this beautiful two-tone titanium. Once again, thank you to Gonzo Reviews for loaning me this knife for a while. I was considering possibly purchasing this, but I think I'm going to stick with my version because I just think there's a couple of things design-wise that don't match up with my body and my hands. Overall though, I think at $185, the knife is well built. It has great fit and finish, good quality materials. If you want the S35 blade with this beautiful bead blast finish and the two-tone titanium, then this is the knife for you. If you don't need that, the standard version at about 40% of that cost, that might be a better option for you. Again, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Leave me a like and a comment. I always love hearing from everyone. And as always, folks, stay sharp.